Thank you, thank you. It's great to be here in Montreal. I'm from Quebec. I'm from north of Quebec, Saguenay, for those who might know where it is. And I've been in Silicon Valley for 22 years. Serial entrepreneurs, created 5 businesses, led a few others, a couple of exits, a couple of miserable failures. And now really my new baby is Startup Genome. So today I want to talk to you about the state of the nation is about what we can do together, right? It's not about what we can do individually, because you do the best at what you do, right? You create products, you manage your team, but really what we do together has a huge impact. And that's why Startup Genome is there, is to look at ecosystems and what does it mean, right? We're there to help you increase your success and help governments, help leaders locally that are supporting you to build more and more resources in your ecosystems. So, we've built the largest movement to help startups in the world. We are supported now by 35 governments across 25 countries. We're supported by Crunchbase, who have data from PitchBook's Deal Room, Orb Intelligence. Right? We are supported by 400 incubators, accelerators, helping us understand how ecosystems work, what works, what makes a difference, and give that back to you. So all of our reports are for free. Go to startupgenome.com, and there's a lot of insights for you from that understanding of ecosystems. This is a map of where we are, right? And we have now built the largest data set to understand startups. 100,000 founders has given us 20 minutes of their time to codify, to quantify how they live startup ecosystems. That's never been done, right? And now we work with Global Entrepreneurship Network and great partners. And then we have now data from a lot of accelerators and incubators. And the result of this is really a structured model of how do we create more startups in a city, how do we create more startups going global, and how do we create exits, right, that return value to the ecosystem and experience. So go to our reports 2017, 2018, and start to understand this. But what I want to talk about today is really about, what can we do together that's bigger than us, right? How do we create scale-ups? That's our goal, right? Create a big company that is really thriving, that creates jobs, economic growth, right? So let's break down that problem a little bit. Because a lot of people, think, well, it's a national issue. And what they mean by that is, you're a startup in the US, you have a huge advantage, right? When you look at this chart, you see that a lot of the scale-ups are created in the US, the 50 million plus, right, which we call the early scale-ups, and then the billion-dollar ones, right? Clear difference, but that's a myth, right? When you look at, when you break down the US into cities, now you realize that Silicon Valley is great, New York, Houston, great economy, not creating scale-ups. Dallas, I always like to point out that they're the 4th largest economy in the US, and how many unicorns have you heard from Dallas? 0, right? Right? It's an ecosystem issue. It's a local issue, right? Clearly. The other myth is the myth of the big funding rounds, right? I often talk with academics, and they say, we're lacking big funding rounds. That's why we don't have scale-ups. And I'm like, no, funding is needed, right? But it doesn't cause scale-ups, right? You can have a scale-up without big funding rounds, and if you don't have global market reach, if you don't start creating a high potential business model, you gain traction, you don't get a large funding round. You have success first, right? The investors are smart. They reward big funding rounds when you have early success. But this, suggests maybe the opposite, right? 36% of billion-dollar club, that's what we call the unicorns plus the billion-dollar exits, get a Series A of higher than 10 million. And you're like, wow, maybe they're right, right? But when we look at the distribution of such rounds all over the world, we realize that it's pretty spread out, right? So this is definitely not the causal effect, right? The causal effect of this, right? This is the ratio of scale-ups by city. We're the only one who can draw that map because we're the only one who can assess how many scale-ups there are in each city on a standardized fashion. And you can see the rate of billion-dollar scale-ups in Silicon Valley. London, New York is much higher. Tel Aviv is great at creating early scale-ups, but unable to create billion-dollar plays, right, and so forth. But how do you explain this huge difference, right, by cities? And so let's jump into that. The two biggest issues are being connected to the knowledge of the world, right? We're all competing for global markets. We're all competing for resources and talent all over the world. And if you don't know what's going on all over the world, you can't create a globally leading startup. And this is our relationship between going global and being connected and exits in all of the cities we've assessed, 55 cities. And you can see the clear relationship. Those that have startups that are connected globally and that go global early create more exits, right? Very simple chart. You see an outlier there. Who wants to take a guess who that is? That's Beijing, right? They don't need to be globally connected. They own the Chinese market. It's a huge market, and they're doing well with that. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, but the map of knowledge now we've drawn with 10,000 startups every year, founders saying, how many people do they know that they can call on the phone and talk an hour this week, right? The quality relationship between us that we call really the fabric of knowledge of tech. This is a 3D model. You can't change the dots, right? My data scientist says, okay, this is fixed. You can turn it, but I cannot change the dots. This is a real representation of the data. You can see Silicon Valley in the middle, New York very close, London. And this is really how people in your city are connected to knowledge. And when they're connected to knowledge, which is the x-axis here, right? This is at the ecosystem level. So when all of us in a city are connected to others in the top ecosystem, which is San Francisco, New York, London, Berlin, Tel Aviv, Shanghai, and Singapore, where there's nexus of knowledge, we go global much faster at an early stage. So this is pre-seed, mostly startups that we survey, right? So you see the clear relationship, but you also see that bigger ecosystems are not necessarily more connected, right? So this is about having the knowledge by being connected and then realizing that potential. So connection is potential. I know what's going on. I might be able to create a leading business model, and then I realize it by getting out of the country and selling to global customers, right? And those who do, that's B2B, right? It's B2C is easy. You put it on Facebook, you put it on AdWords, you go global rapidly. But in B2B, it's very hard, right? Salespeople, biz dev, right? Going to the US, it's not easy. But those startups that do it, the B2B startups that do it, grow their revenues 2.1 times faster. This looks like it's very conceptual, but actually this is a regression analysis from thousands of startups. Right, so it's real. These are the ones that accelerate, right? Exponential growth, 2.1 times faster revenue growth. And guess what? They accelerate, they raise larger funding rounds, and they become scale-ups, right? So the big question I had as I started really owning this research was, what about Stockholm, right? Stockholm is tiny. How did they create billion-dollar exits at such high rate, right? Highest rate of billion-dollar exits. Well, that's missing on the legend. But just a tiny bit lower than Silicon Valley. Amazing. And when we look at them, right, high global connectedness, high global market reach. The measure here is like the percentage of your customers outside of your continent. So for Stockholm, that's them going to Asia and North America at seed, right, or pre-seed. Right? So amazing, right? It really clearly explains it. So state of the nation is what can we do together? And I put here a few Canadian cities. We have all of the cities that you're probably from. And you can see Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, Waterloo, right? Not going global enough, right? Toronto is pretty well connected, but not going global enough as a community, realizing their their potential created by being connected. Right? The other thing that we can do together is local connections. And it really starts with this. Right? It's us helping each other. Right? As a founder in Silicon Valley, I moved there in '96, and nobody told me to help others. Right? But the culture was there. Right? A lot of people say Silicon Valley won against Boston, and they were pretty much neck to neck in the late '90s. Because Silicon Valley people, we help each other. We don't compete, we talk. Right? There's no like, oh, I'm stealth, I'm not telling anyone what I'm doing. Everybody talks about it, and we help each other. Right? And that community sense is the difference. And when we look at startups, and when I look at all my data, right, thousands of startups telling us how much revenue they have, how many employees, and how many people do they know locally? How many investors do they know? How many experts do they know? How many people spent hours helping them in the last 2 weeks? Right? That's what we measured, to measure what we call now local connectedness. And what we realize is that startups that are highly connected in the ecosystem see their revenues grow 2 times faster. A little bit like what we saw earlier, right? You go global, you grow faster, and you're connected. That means you have access to a network of knowledge locally, people helping you. Right? You have access to investors informally, so they help you. You have access to money, employees, right? Recruitment. It's really a network of help and of knowledge that we're creating together, or we're not, right? But those startups that are not doing it, right, pay for it. And as a founder, I always wondered, like, it takes a lot of time to make relationships. What if I spend less time there? I'm already in Silicon Valley. We're already connected. We're globally connected. So why don't I focus on my product and raising money, right? And I don't spend time networking. Well, the answer is here, right? For every individual startup, if you're not connected, right, you're missing out on a lot of knowledge. And you're missing out on access to funding. You're missing out on access to employees. This is going to hurt you, right? This is individual, and I say that because we always talk about it's good globally, right, together to create an ecosystem, right? But unless it's important to you, you might not do it, right? But now I'm telling you, we've quantified it. It's important to you. The more connected people, spend more time connecting and help them, right? This is a breakdown of the 3 indexes that we have, which is collisions. You meet a lot of people. And then you develop relationships. And the third one is sense of community, is people helping each other. Talk to founders and help them. Right here is like, how many hours have you spent, as someone spent helping you in the last two weeks? We didn't ask how many hours did you spend helping someone else, because we assume you'll exaggerate, right? I would probably exaggerate. So we ask you, how many hours did someone else help you? Right? And you can see Silicon Valley is 5.6 hours on average over the last 2 years. So 2.8 hours that someone spent listening to my pitch, telling me their tricks on marketing, right? Montreal, Toronto, not as good, right? An hour and a half. This is good, but we can do better, right? This is the state of the nation. What can we do together that is better? And this is the big breakthrough, right? Is if we don't help each other, we individually do worse, but together we do worse. It's an ecosystem play. You saw earlier in the slides, right? It's not the best startups in Johannesburg are creating, billion-dollar unicorns. No, if you're not in a community that helps each other and that's connected to the global community, it's not working. So it's always community, right? So we have here introductions. You make introductions to others, to investors, customers. And here's investors and experts helping you, right? People who did not invest in you, you're not paying, but they know it's important, right? This is Brad Feld saying, hey, you're an investor, you're experienced, you did not invest, still help them, right? Spend time. We're helping the next generation. We're helping our economy, right? This is bigger than us individually. So what this means to you really is, develop a tight community locally. And that means you taking action, right? Developing relationship. Ask first what you can do for them. And people will help you back, right? and ask for help also from others, right? We do that all the time in Silicon Valley, right? I say, hey, can you listen to my pitch? I have 2 investor pitches next week. Really want to see what you think, right? And at one point, you get really important informations. I was telling you about my miserable failures, and one was B2C health. It was called MediGift, community of support around someone who has, a big health issue in their family. Right? I'm helping my father who has cancer. And I'm a B2B software guy, right? So I go in there, B2C health. My co-founder had $100 million exits. We have money from Sequoia, right? One of the best VCs in the world. And we're like, we're going to kick ass, right? It's going to be amazing. And then starting to do this, and it's not working, right? And a year into it, I'm at a conference, right? A health tech conference. And I never went to those because I was a B2B software guy, right? And then I meet this guy, he's a hospital software. I'm like, yeah, maybe I should talk to him, maybe not. Well, I talk to him. And he says, hey, you're doing kind of the same thing as these other 2 startups over there, right? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's like, well, you're the 3rd generation of startups doing this. I've been coming to this conference for 10 years, and all the other ones are not here because they died. And I'm like, $1 million information, but a year too late, right? So if I had been connected, right, someone else would have told me what failed, right? You need to know that. Not only what failed in your city, you want to know what failed in Singapore that tells you something, right? And I would not have repeated their mistake, right? I would have learned from it. And it's not written in Crunchbase. It's not written anywhere. This knowledge is in your mind, my mind, investors' mind, experts' mind, people who have done it before and have been there for a while. We can give you, a lot of blah, blah, but once in a while, $1 million sentence, right? So this is the value, right? And then is really becoming part of the global community, right? If you're in San Francisco, you don't need to do anything because people from Singapore, Tel Aviv, they flock here, they move, right? But if you're in Montreal, that means you need to travel. Singapore, so we break down all of those metrics. We have 100 metrics. And Singapore, they travel a lot. Nobody goes to Singapore, to Stockholm. Right? Stockholm is doing great. They're connected because they travel. They jump on a flight, they go to London, they go to San Francisco, they meet people, and that's how they get this knowledge. That's how they're part of the global community. They can't wait and stay where they are, right? They cannot count on investors to tell them everything. You need to connect yourself. And when you do that, you bring back relationships, and you help others, and you tell them what you heard, and you say, oh, I met a startup in San Francisco. They're actually based in Singapore, and they do something you should probably know. Talk to them. And finally, is go global early. This is realizing that potential that you create, right? Go talk to customers and learn if you have the best software in the world. That's the only way to know, right? If you sell to Montreal customers, they're not going to tell you whether you have the best startups in the world, right? So thank you very much. Hope that helps.